Welcome to our second edition of This Is BS, the ISO. I have a fantastic guest today, a legend of the recruitment industry and a legend of video recruitment as well, someone who's pioneered it in the last few years, especially in the time I've been with Video My Job. Our guest today, the one and only Mark Smith. Mark, how are we doing today?
G'day Ben, I'm very well, and look, I'm dressed like it's 1985 in my suit here and tie. I think I'm the only bloke in Sydney wearing a tie, but it's my uniform. So maybe first thing that people are probably going to say, well, you know, he's wearing a suit. That's bullshit. Right? We've got to get past that pretty quickly, I think.
I'm sorry, but you're in the office, right? So it's kind of like you're trying to keep sort of our idea of being in the office with the suit and tie. I wear a t-shirt.
You're at home and you're in a t-shirt. There you go. How does that work?
Like, to be fair though as well, you've got a much nicer background than mine, which is basically Crash Bandicoot and desk, which is fine. So yours is far nice with the Mandela thing background.
Yeah, well, let me read what Mr. Mandela says, because I think it's really important, even in these times actually. It says, never give up. There's no such thing as an ending, just a new beginning, which I think is really appropriate given the circumstances that we're all in at the moment, for sure.
Well, I find that that's actually a really great way to start this off, actually, is looking at these troubled times and focusing on that. So with everything that's happening, before we get into the BSs, you know, we're obviously in a crazy level of time now where, you know, we talked off camera before about, you know, the global financial crisis and leading through some stuff. So the business that you've got, People2People and stuff like that, why don't you give us a bit of background on People2People and your experience, and then also kind of what you're doing now during these times to kind of combat the crazy pandemic that we're in at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So P2P started in 2005, February 2nd, 2005. So we had our 15th birthday at the beginning of this year. So we're a middle market white collar recruiter. So we've got offices throughout Australia and New Zealand. We've got 8 offices. And our turnover prior to the recession was about that sort of 110, 120 million sort of mark. Obviously, we've had a significant decline since then. So what are we doing right now? Well, we're maintaining our activity. We're initiating conversations with people is essentially what we're doing. There's the number of vacancies that are being listed with us right now is substantially down on where it would normally be. But this is the third time I've lived through a downturn as a manager in a recruitment agency. Each one is different. Each one has its own particular flavour, I suppose you'd say. This one has the health aspect. The GFC had the global financial element to it. The tech wreck was just was something completely different again. So those are the 3 downturns. So look, the one thing I can tell you about this one is that it will end and we'll get to the other side, and you just need to work your way through it. I suppose we'll talk a little bit about that. One of my BS moments, I think, is the way some people are actually dealing with this, but we'll get to that, I suppose, in a second.
You know, like I find that fascinating, and having worked with you guys for a couple of years now and kind of seeing the nature of the business and how the tenacity of your consultants, even at times like this and things like that, I find incredibly endearing. A lot of the time you see these people who have gone through what can only be described as a hell of a time, you know, especially if you're in the age bracket that I'm in, where it's kind of like global financial crisis was just before you, kind of with the workforce and other things like that, and then the dot-com bubble, obviously, you know, back when we were kids. This is the first time that a lot of my generation are experiencing this, and it's the first time you can kind of see the middle of those in this age bracket who kind of understand that. So not to make you feel old or anything, no, but that's kind of how it works for us. But what I find is that this is something else we're going to talk about a little bit in terms of the nature of innovation, especially from individuals and other people that come through, whether it be creating new platforms and new companies, all the way through to doing their job in a more efficient manner that might be, you know, able to help the company in some of the aspects. And that's something I want to go through in one of your points. But what I'll also be curious to know before we get started and that sort of stuff as well is, you're clearly a man who runs a ship pretty darn tightly, but you are someone who's implemented our platform, Video My Job, consistently. What I'd like to know from you is first, before we jump into everything, is, you know, what's your background, say, in the theatre, media? What kind of brought you to the idea that you need to be an innovative first recruitment business?
I think, look, I do theatre background. That's very interesting, Ben. You put me on the spot there. You're bringing back a whole series of different memories for me, because when I was at university, back in the late 80s, early 90s was when I actually was at university. I was actually an extra in the movies. So
any movies would know?
No, but the ones that you would know is I was handing out chips in Brides of Christ, if you've ever seen that miniseries. E Street, which was a TV program. I used to go and sit in the pub and the church and that sort of thing for it. But anyway, but that's not, so that is in no way relevant to using video in the recruitment industry. I think, look, what the main reason is that having lived through a couple of these downturns, is that if you, and let me just bring it straight out here. I'll read out what my first BS thing is here, is that waiting for the old days to come back, that's bullshit. Those people who are sitting there in their office right now, sitting at their desk, whether it be at home or in their office, as a recruiter going, right, well, I'm just going to wait this out. I'm going to wait for the old days to come back again. Then you are in for a very rude shock. It is never coming back. It's not going to be the same way it was before. And each time we go through one of these downturns, there's always some sort of innovation and change that comes through. So, and we're already getting the sense of that as we're having this conversation in a Zoom meeting right now. It's just the beginning of what will be a huge change, and sort of brought it all forward. It was interesting. I was chatting to one of our managers in New Zealand, and she was chatting to the HRD of a large multinational in Auckland. And they had a 3-year change management plan, which they've brought, a change management plan that was meant to be implemented over 3 years. It's now been brought forward completely and going to be implemented in the second half of this year. That is demonstrative of what's going to happen. There's going to be change everywhere, and you can't be frightened of it. I think there's a feeling that you get. Like there's that, when you're frightened, you're scared, that churn in your stomach, etc. And if you talk to a sportsman, an elite athlete, they'll talk to you about that excitement that they feel before they go on to play the grand final, that energy that they're going to harness before they run out onto that field. Well, that energy, that feeling, that churn is what other people would describe as fear. I'm frightened. That feeling they associate with fear, whereas the association should be more about anticipation and excitement. So, I know I'm getting a little bit lost here, but anticipating the change, being excited about the circumstances that we're in now, that's where I'm at right now. But believe me, financially, this is devastating, but I'm actually quite excited and anticipating the change that's going to come after this particular downturn. So
look, I'd actually like to dive into one of the key points you raised regarding the old days. Now, the thing that I find fascinating about this whole downturn and stuff like that is people being so excited, or like people who like say, we want to get back to the old times. And a lot of people, the old times were working a 9-to-5 job, working a lot of the time, focusing heavily on their work rather than sort of looking at that life balance. So I totally get that.
Wearing a blue shirt, yellow tie, that sort of thing.
So what I'd like to kind of question you on is what do you think deems old days in this context? What exactly are we looking at when it says going back to the old days? What are we losing in that sense?
2019, that's the old days.
Yep.
Yeah. Living those moments, like I'm not talking about 20 years ago. I'm talking about 6 months ago. The circumstances of which we did business 6 months ago are gone. The top of the market was 2018. I've been in the recruitment industry since 1994, and I reckon 2018 is a top 3 year as to the financial rewards and the amount of business that was going through. It was a sensational year. And those days are well and truly past us. So that's what I mean about the old days. It's just about the way we go about doing business. So that's not just about working from home, because, by the way, that's another one of my bullshit.
We'll get to that one a little later on, but I do have...
Yeah, which is why everyone wants to work from home. No, they don't. No, and that certainly is a big change. We'll get to that, though.
Yeah, I'll look into one question that you got first on the old... You just mentioned something there which is very important. Circumstances have changed, and it's going from the 2019 to where we are now at 2020, sort of everything that's going on there. In the recruitment industry specifically, what circumstances do you think have changed the most?
Well, the biggest, there's a few things. I'll focus on the biggest, for the recruitment industry, the thing that is different about this particular downturn, and that is the hesitancy that exists in candidate behaviour. So it's a supply side as well as a demand issue. So in the GFC, in the tech wreck, there was a drop in demand. So people just weren't looking to hire anybody anymore. And the speed at which that decline happened was over a period of months. But on the supply side, there were candidates who were always keen to go about, to take on new opportunities, to expand their careers. So there wasn't a hesitancy on the candidate side. Yeah. What's different this time round is that not only has demand collapsed, but there is a hesitancy on the supply side, on the candidate side, so that they are reluctant to explore new opportunities or to take a risk because of the uncertainty that exists. And that uncertainty is both financial, but also from a health perspective. It's that health element that's really throwing a spanner in the works. We had somebody who didn't turn up went to a temp job for one day and then said, no, I can't go anymore. The public transport thing, I'm not going to do that. Now, if that was the GFC, they would have been delighted to have the job in the first place. Now, what's happening is you've got the health issues and the other uncertainty, which is trumping the fact that there's a job there for them. So that dichotomy is the biggest change on this one. Okay. And I'll just wrap up there to give it a real, because I'm a statistics guy and a former accountant. Yeah. That's why I'm wearing a suit. I'm indoctrinated. That's where I am.
Yes.
I can't break that mold. Is the unemployment numbers that were released last week. 594,000 people were lost their job, but only 100 and something thousand actually went onto the unemployment queue. Why is there that difference? The difference is that when they ask the surveys, they say, are you looking for work? Then that 400,000 people said, no, I'm not. That is the supply issue, the candidate hesitancy writ large in statistics. So you sit there and go, right, you might be battling hard as a recruiter to finally you get a job on. Fantastic. Like, you got that, yeah, I've got it. All that hard work I've done, I've got that job on. And now you're in a situation where you think, well, I should be able to access, there's a load of candidate supply out there. That is a myth. It doesn't exist. It's just as hard now to source candidates in this market because of the candidate hesitancy. I don't know how long that's going to last, by the way, but I think that is the unique nature of this particular downturn for the recruitment industry for sure.
Okay, so I'd like to quickly jump on one of the things that really interests me there, because with any situation like this, you tend to have a narrative that's driven from the top to the bottom in regards to things like the way people are reacting to certain things like this. I'm sure GFC and .com were sort of the same thing. But what I'd be curious on, one of the points that you raised that really piqued my interest, was talking about the nature of the hesitancy. Now, a lot of people we've spoken to on this conversation or around this sort of things have talked about hesitancy of companies to go out there and potentially recruit during this time. We get some people like that, others that are opposite, that are getting lots of call centers, lots of things going on. Outside of the health issue side of things, do you think this is also an element of now that because we have this level of support from the government around JobKeeper as well, being that sort of thing, do you think that also leads to the element of going, well, if I've got this income stream from this particular job, I don't need to jump to another one and stuff like that? What do you think outside of the health issue also leads to that hesitancy from the candidate?
Yeah, there's a level of security, which is great. I mean, I actually think the JobKeeper and the JobKeeper and JobSeeker changes that were made in response to the COVID crisis were exactly the right thing to do. But there are unforeseen consequences to those policy changes. Yeah, and so one of them is the fact that it enables hesitancy. It means that people will not take the first thing that happens because they've got security, and that security is not a bad thing, by the way. No. What it does mean, though, that in 6 months' time, when we get to the end of JobKeeper, or the fact that JobSeeker then drops in value if they decide to do that, then that moment will be huge. That will see a big change then.
Okay, so that's another point that, in my conversation I had with Rebecca Powell last week regarding the same sort of conversation when it came to the timeline that we're looking at. Now, the timeline could be anything at the moment because, anything from a vaccine to, potential social distancing measures will change the elements. So you talk about that particular candidate going, sorry, I can't jump on. This is kind of what I want to lead to in regards to this whole point in regards to the old day, the hesitancy, stuff like that. In the business that you're in, and what you kind of do, there's an element of how recruitment companies and recruitment consultants have helped people get those jobs in that sense. So what I'd like to kind of boil it down to now is this one question is, you've got people saying we're going to go back to the old days, or 2019, early 2020, whatever it may be. What would you suggest would be something that people could do, or the positive outcome of this? What could someone do to eliminate the idea in their head that the old days are coming back, everything's going to be back to normal? What can you do to look at this from a positive perspective? What would you suggest in that sense?
Well, now's the time that all the barriers to those changes that you could possibly have done previously are dropped. So now is the time to experiment. Now, it's always I was chatting about this morning with somebody, is that it seems that the irony is that the moment where you can actually experiment the most is the moment where you don't have the money to actually go ahead and do that straight away. So that's why I'm a big fan of a thing called nudge economics. I don't know, the nudge theory. Yeah. So that idea of small changes in behavior lead to much larger outcomes. Well, now's the time to talk to your people about if we could change things, what could we change? Let's do this now. What is that sacred cow that you want to slaughter? Like, let's do it. Now's the time to really take action and experiment with these things. So see it as a very positive, because in the past and prior, so you are often restrained by the fact that what you're currently doing is providing you with a return which is great, and that is exactly what was taking place during 18 and less so in 19. But why change what you're doing when it's giving you so much reward? So let's not change anything right now, which is probably not the right thing to do. But and you might have a top biller, for example, and I don't want to upset the apple cart by changing things too much when it's so lucrative for everybody in the business. So those times are so you can now forget about that and take the opportunity now to make some changes. Experiment. Do I know what it's going to look like at the end? I have no idea, but I can tell you what I am doing is I'm experimenting with changing the way we're doing things and taking a look at particular processes right now to see if we can get a better outcome. So or this is the most important thing. It's what you're responding to what your customer wants. So you need to make sure that you are asking don't think that you know what they want. You need to ask them what they want and respond that way. I think you did your very first one of these BS podcasts. You had a guy on from Sales
Graham Hawkins. Yep.
Yeah. He had some really interesting points about that. You've got to attract the customers now rather than pushing for them. He is on the money there for sure. So
I think bringing it there. So I know, because you're raising some very good points in regards to the experimentation. This is what I say as well, is that it's a stitch in time theory, which is basically like you can do the same stitch over and over again, it leads the same path, but as soon as you change the slight tinge, it can go different ways. What I find fascinating about this is that if you are going to experiment and you are in this current situation that you're in now, this is the opportunity to do it, because that's what built the Ubers, the Airbnbs, the Squares, these sort of companies that took a current situation and were like, okay, what can we do here? And I think that in itself is that you could be any old standard business and then build from there.
But just to take it down into our own personal lives, so that, and it sounds a little bit counterintuitive here, yeah, that we have experienced a moment in our life that will not be repeated again with the complete lockdown. The chances of it happening again, touch wood, that it won't. But this is a huge change that we've all had to experience in our daily life, working from home and all that sort of stuff that's happened.
Yep.
So that is a huge change. Now we're in a situation where we did a little bit of a survey, and there's 70% of the people that we surveyed said that they were hesitant about going back into the office. Oh my God. So they've been through all this change, and now there's more. What I'm trying to say here is that the population is open to accepting change right now because they've experienced a lot of it, and they know that they can take it on board and move forward. So counterintuitively, this moment is the time that you can actually implement change without as much consequence. So the market also, so going back to a business perspective, the market will accept a change from you as an organization or a business or a process, etc., because they are now open to that change, which is why so much innovation takes place after a downturn. Because everyone's okay and they're willing to say, oh yeah, we've just been through this. I completely understand why they've changed that. They've done exactly the right thing. Whereas if beforehand you'd be going, why are they doing that? They were so good at what they were doing before. Now it's a license to actually go and innovate.
Exactly. I think that in itself. So I totally agree with you on the fact that if we build this up to being the old days aren't coming back, but the new days will be here, that's sort of the element that I totally agree with on that point.
I'm so pleased that we have not used the word new normal, because I think I would have suddenly I'd be frozen. I wouldn't actually be on this video.
Let me clarify a key point. I live alone in an apartment in Melbourne. Normal for me was always being at home by myself. So there's nothing new about it.
Isn't there like a COVID bingo thing now? You know, new normal.
Yeah. There's so many companies that are doing it where they'll like there's the funny thing online where it's like the Zoom call of like how many people can mention certain things, or like this is one thing that I've started doing with a friend of mine in the UK is when we listen to podcasts and stuff like that, is the mention of those keywords. So things like new normal, back to work, shut down, social distancing, and you check how much percentage of a podcast or of a TV show, whatever it may be, is around that. And I think looking at companies like ABC and Seven and going, they went from 0 to like 80% of their content is around that, and just go, okay.
We've just done it ourselves, so we've got to stop that as well.
I think the difference is we're taking the piss out of it just fine. So I totally agree with your number one. The old days aren't coming back, but the new days are coming here soon. So I totally agree with that. So let's take that and move on to the next one, your number two, because I think number two actually it latches onto this, but kind of goes in its own way. So why don't you run me through what your second BS?
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's a bit of a plug for Video My Job, and it's not. So, sorry, I didn't mean that.
I'm not going to apologise.
But it's, all these people say, I don't need to do social, I don't need to do video. That's not, I've got my relationships with my clients, I don't need to do that. Bullshit. Yes, you do. What they seem to be forgetting is that they have existing relationships, right? I don't care whether you're a salesperson or a person who's providing services in any industry. Yeah, it's not just recruitment, but those people right now who have this existing portfolio of clients and existing relationships, they've got to go back and think about how did they initiate those relationships in the first place? What was it that they did to get those relationships? Because they dismiss now all of these, and speaking in a sales perspective, they're dismissing the new channels for which you can actually initiate relationships. It's like walking across the room in a nightclub. Ben, I know this is probably very common here. So you walk across the room. You've got to walk across the room and say, hey, can I buy you a drink? Can you go for a dance or whatever? Listen to me. I sound very 1985. What is it? Next minute I'll be talking about Billy Ocean and get into my car. Jesus. Sorry. I
never thought I'd get a Billy Ocean reference on this. So.
There you go.
Yeah. So continue on. Sorry, but you were saying.
So it's about initiating relationships. So there are now it's a multi-channel world in terms of bringing personal relationships. Because we are although business to business, but essentially we are in recruitment in Australia and New Zealand and South Africa and UK at least. The expectation of the customer is the person who sells the service is the person who delivers the service. So it's a very personalized approach that you need to take to win that, to initiate the relationship. So in the old days, there was only one channel. That channel was the phone. Yeah. That changed after the GFC. Yeah. That before the GFC, it was always people were waiting, just get on the phone, get on the phone. After that, it's become a multi-channel world. All of the different social channels. And what does social love? Social loves video. There's your plug for Video My Job. Yeah. So that's why you need to be on these channels to initiate new relationships. Yeah. If you can rely on your old client base, that's fine. If you're okay and that's your world, you go right ahead. But if you're somebody who's just new into the recruitment industry and you're going, right, I'm going to show these guys how to do it. You need to be able to initiate relationships with people. And it's not just about picking up the phone and calling somebody. You need to be able, as again, using your first broadcast or whatever, his idea, which is repeating what it is. You've got to create value and you've got to attract them in. And the way you do that is you've got to use multi-channel approach. You've got to provide value and you've got to tell people about the value you provide, and you use a multi-channel approach to do that.
Here's the thing. I'm going to touch on a couple of points on that, because yes, obviously you've applied for Video My Job and we're a fantastic company in what we do. But what my role is specifically in this business is to make sure that companies utilize the content in a way that brings them value long term. So discussing this is a very constant thing for me. But one thing I think is really important when it comes to the recruitment side of things is that you look at new recruitment consultants that come in and they've got more of a socially channeled mind than some of the old ones, for example, and that's understandable. But here's the factor that's really important, is that when you're creating, whether it be content or anything like that, there's nothing more frustrating for someone like me who trains lots and lots of people on how to utilize content, but someone who's utilizing it in a way that's trying to bring themselves value first, rather than the person they're making the video for. And I've done sessions where I've taught people about the language that you use is important when it's a shoe on the other foot side of things. So to bring it back to one of the key points that you made regarding initiating relationships, you don't need to initiate the relationship with a phone call or a direct one-to-one. You can create content online, LinkedIn, stuff. A great example of this is Gary Vee. He does it all the time with his initiation side of things. But you can create content that add values to a business. And if you consistently keep doing that, but you're not getting anything from it, you're just posting content, talking about things. Eventually, they may come to you and go, hey, I see you've given us all this content, you've given us all this information, and that's where that starts. Graham made a great example of the education model, which is the more you educate, the more likely you are to have an educated buyer down the line. That's the most important part. So,
and in a recruitment world, so just to bring it back to, so recruitment consultants who may be listening to this, is that so if you're using a multi-channel approach, when you do pick up the phone and you leave a voicemail, because most of the time you'll leave a voicemail, they will call you back. And I'm both the client and also potential candidates that you're trying to find, because those candidates are really hesitant right now. So they will call you back. They will take, what I'm trying to say is they'll take your call. Yeah, they'll take a call, or even if you schedule a call with them, they'll take it because they know who you are. They have an awareness of your personal brand and also the brand of your company. So it's so profoundly different. If you're just a stranger and some sort of push technique on a call that you make, that's bullshit. That just won't work anymore. You need to do it in a different way.
And that's the thing, that's the big part about this, is the push-pull method of, like, how are you going about attracting the right people. I can give you an example of this in regards to someone in your business who's been doing this fantastic well. So if anybody wants to follow the lovely Amy Burton on LinkedIn, she posts a lot of good content that's outside of just simply going, I've got a job ad, which I think is incredibly important. Also, Aidan Boast does it very well and Sally Howard and Erin. All of your team do it great, which is fantastic. But what I want to quickly touch on when it comes to the element of content and multi-channel strategies. Now, what I'm finding, being at the forefront of content in recruitment and stuff like that, is you start to find people that are starting to use it in ways that are quite interesting. And now I'm starting to get a lot of recruitment companies follow me on Instagram or on Twitter, and then they'll start posting content and stuff. And that's a good strategy in terms of bringing in new people. But for your element when it comes to recruitment, what I'm very fascinated by is the element of business development with content, but doing it in the right kind of way. So you talked about the candidate side of things or the client side of things. I teach people about utilizing video in emails to send to people, but explain that it's nothing to do with trying to get them to buy a business. Just go, hey, if you're interested to know about this information, I've got a video here that teaches you in 2 minutes how to go about doing X, Y, Z. So what I'd like to know from you in terms of the initiating relationship side of things, are there any pieces of content that you think would be the most beneficial to start the ball rolling for someone, someone who's thinking about like getting into video content? What would be the first sort of series of videos that they could potentially make that would bring the most value to their network?
I think I don't have an answer to that question. I think it's too broad. I think it's too hard. I think you because you've got to tailor your content to your market.
Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. I can't give you a straight answer, basically. So, and it's got to be something that, and just get back to now, this is old school. One thing you've got to be thinking about for the person that you're communicating with is what's in it for them. Right? It's a very egocentric world. So what's in it? What's in it for them to have this conversation with you? So I'm about to, after our call today, I'm about to do a session. We have a foundation piece of marketing. We did a snap poll on the COVID response, workforce management, about, anyway, I won't go through into the details, but so now we've got a document that we're going to use. So now we're going to push it out all on the different social channels. And I'm going to talk to the consultants about how they initiate those calls. So there'll be calls, or there'll be a call followed up by an email, or there'll be an introduction via LinkedIn or a direct message on Twitter, whatever it happens to be. And then, so the one thing that they're going to do is they're going to try and, the message that they're going to pass to the potential person that they're going to try and set a meeting with, there's another change, a meeting online like this, a Zoom meeting with somebody, is that to give them the message, this is why you should have this meeting with me. This is what's in it for you. Yeah? So And that's different for each market that you're in, which each segment that you're in, whether you're a recruiter or you're not a recruiter, or if you're in talent acquisition and you're trying to headhunt staff, whatever it happens to be.
That's in fact, that's a better answer than what I could have given. Gave me a couple of ideas, but a couple of suggestions, because in itself, the market is so different for every person that's making content. If you're a talent acquisition for a business, recruitment consultant for a small boutique firm, if you're in sales and marketing for a large multinational, if you're in marketing for a small tech firm, everyone's got a different audience. And a good example of this is when you look at people like our head of marketing, Tamara Gregg, makes amazing blogs, but it's all about how the video creators and the consumers can work together, as opposed to being like, here's how you can get the most followers or likes or engagement, stuff like that. So I find a lot of egocentric, me content doesn't be as successful online. And I can tell you that for a fact, having made videos for the last 4 or 5 years in the way that I do it, the more successful videos I've got in terms of people looking at our product or looking at the education we do, is all about what's in it for them. And I always go, there's 4 things you can look at. There's opportunity, contribution, environment, and culture. Those 4 things are important. So what's the opportunity for them when they watch the video? What are they going to get out of it? Contribution, are they able to contribute to the community? Are they able to give their thoughts? Environment side of things, okay, what makes your environment different to someone else's if you're a big business, a small business? And then culture side of things is what makes it different from a small firm to a big firm. So if you look at those when you're creating the content, that itself is perfect. So you've actually answered my question already, saying what would you change? You've already kind of emphasized the nature of just getting out there and doing it and looking at different ways of putting that content together. So totally agree with it. In fact, one thing I will plug in regards to your business as well is that when you listen to a guy like Greg Savage, who talks about the nature of how businesses run, he often uses you guys as the example of how you go about doing that. So, and he makes a lot of videos through our platform, and a lot of them are 60 seconds, because if you go more than that, and you can see on the episode I did with him, he can speak a lot of times. So that's always good. So I will emphasize as well, guys, this is the first session of ThisIsBS that you're watching that will have 5 BSs on this one, because Mark and I have got to go through quite a few. It'll be great today. So let's move on to the third one now to make it as effective as possible. So I like this one. We've discussed it off camera. Run me through your third ThisIsBS.
Is this the one? I think it's the right one, Ben. Is everyone likes to or wants to work from home?
This is the one I'm interested in, because...
Yeah, and I think that's bullshit.
Okay.
Absolutely, 100%. I think that this is my experience, my personal experience of it, is that prior to the recession, I don't even know what we're going to call it now. There's another thing that you could put out there on somewhere and say, what should we call it? So we had the GFC, we had the tech wreck, or the .com boom or bust, or whatever you want to call it. What's this one?
Stay-at-home virus?
COVID car crash.
Oh, the car crash, what do you want to call it? Yeah, something like that.
So anyway, whatever, whilst we've got this now, but prior to it, we actually put together a thing called P2P Perks. And as part of that was, basically, as the company grew, we had to get to a point where we had to articulate what the benefits are of working with the company. And one of those was flexible working time and working from home. Yeah. So, but the fact that benefit, so we assumed that working from home was a benefit. So even just that thought process, well, that's a benefit. Well, now it's not that. It is normal. Yeah. It's at the moment it's a necessity, but afterwards it'll be an option, not perceived as a benefit. So I think that that mindset has now changed, and so the fact that people will have that option means that we will find that not everybody ultimately wants to work from home. I certainly don't. I needed the contrast between my home and the office. I find it very difficult to work from home. So I think that's the main point I wanted to make. A couple of recruitment specific points on it. One is if you have a very experienced team. So in our Brisbane office, pretty much everybody in the office up there has got over 5 years worth of recruitment experience. Nobody is back in the office at the moment. But if you have, and we're very keen on training our own people, and we have a para-consultant scheme, and we had a graduate scheme, which we've now canned, of course. But that was all about training and growing our own people. Now, how do you coach somebody in the moment if they're not there? You're not in their moment. You are remote. You can't hear the phone call that they make. you're not actually there to coach them. So they might be undertaking all the activity that's required of them, but the quality of that activity you can't monitor. And recruitment as an industry, sure, you can provide online training, face-to-face training and all that sort of thing. Formalized is what I'm trying to say, training. But most of the time, it is learned by sitting next to somebody or listening to somebody undertake the job itself. So what we're paid for is the ability to not to find all the matching will happen with technology, etc. in the next few years. Yeah? So what we do is actually bring the people, get your candidate to sit in front of the client. Now that process, that seduction, as Greg likes to call it, is the part which is very hard to teach. You have to be in the moment, listening, understanding what's happening on both sides of the phone, for example. It's not the way you write an email, so you can formalize it that way. Each of those circumstances is different. There's normally a pattern to it, but you need to coach people in that moment so they can handle the next circumstance. The way I use it when I'm training people, I describe it as arrows in a quiver. So you need to, when you're a young recruiter, you've got 1 or 2 arrows in your quiver and you pull them out to deal with different situations. If you've been recruiting for 15 years, or in my case, 25 years, you've got a full quiver. So you've seen the circumstances before, you can find the right arrow and deal with that circumstance, yeah? But how do you fill up your quiver with arrows? Well, that happens metaphorically by being coached, somebody sitting next to you, and so you're dealing with circumstances. If you're sitting alone at home in your home office, it's extraordinarily difficult to do that. So from a recruitment perspective, it's not probably, although they might want to work from home, it's probably not the right thing for them. And then there are other people who simply don't want to work from home because it can't work. And then there are other people who it does work for, and those options will be available going forward.
That's actually a very good, a very interesting take on it. We get a lot of people now who you may have seen in the news recently that the big tech firms like Google and Facebook are mandating work from home. Square has now moved to fully at home. Everyone's going to be working from home from now on. I find that fascinating. What I find interesting about the recruitment industry being so personalized, I can completely see the nature of junior v senior consultants and how they go about operating. Now, training is the big part that's actually taken a hit from this whole thing, and in terms of being able to be in the room with the person. You're doing Zoom meetings like this. It's very different, and as someone who interviews people for a living, does videos all the time, having that person next to you compared to being on camera is very different in terms of the nature of the body language. So I find that important. But one thing I think is interesting is that for someone like me, I work from home before this, like 2 or 3 days a week, or 1 to 2 days a week, something like that. But the balance between the two is important. Now, I find anybody that works from home the whole time can potentially struggle to split what home and work life would be, which is the problem. The other part that I want to jump on, you talk about quivers and juniors versus seniors. Now, as someone who has been in my industry for X amount of time, I can do this, what I do. But when I was first starting out, I would struggle to kind of do everything I needed to do at home by myself, even if it's on the phone. So what I'd like to get a gauge for is that, are you suggesting that perhaps it's more beneficial that when this comes back, that those in the more senior realm are able to do it, so the junior should be in the office more and kind of build up to that point where they can be more autonomous? Is that sort of what you're referencing?
Yes. I think that's exactly what will happen. I mean, the thing is that the millennials out there will go, you're not a millennial, are you, Ben?
I'm 28, so I assume I am. I don't know. I'm just
you realise in my head I'm 28?
And you realise I'm 50?
I'm not going to tell you how old I am, so in my head I'm 28 years old. So I still view the world through a 28 year. So yeah, I think, but the thing is that the younger people will want to believe that they will be able to do their job properly from home. And yes, you will be able to if your job is technical. So what it means from a management perspective, yeah. So let's say you're a recruitment manager, then when you're sitting next to somebody, you can hear if they're having a bad day or if they need coaching in a call and whatever, we're dealing with a situation, yeah. So you can actually deal with that. From a manager, what that means is that you have to manage purely by outcomes.
Yeah, that is a hard part.
So so you're not managing through potential, so that you can see the potential sitting next to you. What you're managing is outcome. So if they might do all the right I'm using old school language here, but like right number of calls. But if they're initiating enough relationships or whatever that you need to do, whatever measures that you happen to use. So, but if they're doing that, but not getting the outcomes, then they need to leave the business because you can't see their potential. How do you measure somebody's potential if they're not there and they're doing all the right activities that is associated? They say, oh, well, I'm doing the right activities, and you go, but you're not getting the results. Sorry, if you don't get the results, you don't belong here. You've got to go. So it's, I think that is all to play out. That'll be one of the consequences after this particular downturn, how that is all managed and what will become the norm and the people who expected to be in the office and the decisions that managers take to assist people through. If they're in performance management, if they're not getting the outcomes, then maybe they do need to be in the office, or that they might have missed their opportunity because they're at home and suddenly you're going to have to remove them from the business because they're not delivering outcomes because they weren't given the right training. Training's the wrong word, right? Mentoring and coaching at the beginning. Because you can't mentor and coach remotely. It's too hard.
Does that then also lead to a point of going, well, considering the current situation, the nature that we're in and how we're moving, do you think that perhaps that's where the outcomes start to change now, the outcomes of a successful consultant or a recruitment management or business, whatever it may be? Do you think in this... I'm going
to cut you off there and I'm going to say there is only one outcome in business. Profit.
Yep, totally get that. But
you can have all the great altruistic outcomes that you want, and then look at how fabulous the feedback is on the candidates that particular consultant interviews, but not one of them's been placed in a year. They got to go, mate.
No, okay.
You can't stay in business if you don't make a profit.
No, it's not like
in terms of measuring of the outcomes, there is only one.
I think that's the big part to it as well, is that you may see businesses that focus more on the altruistic sort of nature of getting.
How do they stay in business?
Oh, that's the thing. So
unless that altruistic stuff leads to a profit, they will go bust.
But perhaps in the future, because we don't know about it, perhaps maybe some of those altruistic things do lead to the outcome.
Therefore, if those behaviours, if those outcomes lead to profit.
Yep.
Which is exactly what I'm saying about all this other stuff about the multi-channel stuff. Yeah. So if you use them, it's not. Nobody really knows. You have to experiment. You've got to use the channels which lead to the right customer experience. So if that's what the customer wants, if the customer wants that outcome, whether it's altruistic or not, and it leads to you making and you're pricing it correctly and you get a profit, everyone's happy. And that's the beauty of being in business, that everyone is satisfied on both sides of the transaction. Wow, that's very like, that's a long way away from recruitment. I'm talking about transactions, and
it actually bodes well, I think, for talking about the point. I think what it all boils down to now when looking at the nature of what we're talking about is that we started off by talking about work from home, but it also then leads to the element of behavioural management within the space, because it's all new to a lot of people. Is that a lot of people need to have someone next to them in order to function properly. It's nothing negative. It's just a case of certain personalities require people to be on their shoulder or right next to them and stuff like that. As opposed to some people who can.
Here's another outcome from this that I think, which is very recruitment relevant, is and it's on this whole management of. So in the past, the biggest complaint of recruitment consultants that you'd hear saying, "Well, I can't work there. There's too much micromanagement." And it depends on what does micromanagement really mean. Now you're in a situation where people almost want micromanagement. So they want to be on. Of course, so I've had more contact with individuals, like my managers. I speak to them more frequently on the video call now than I used to do it in person. I'd go to their office and sit down and sit in front of them and all that sort of thing, and hear what's going on in the office. Now I don't do that. It's all remotely. But what I'm finding in the feedback is that all of the managers are having more contact more regularly via video phone hookups with their team. And in those calls, what they're doing is they're setting objectives. Yeah. Almost like in old days, micromanagement. So what are we going to do today? And then at the end of the day, people get on the call and say, yeah, I had this success and I did this. But what people have is ultimate control of what they do at home or in their own space at home. Yeah. but they're still delivering the outcome at the end. But so it's almost like more micromanagement. So if you actually said to somebody before the COVID crisis that, there you go, I'm using a name now. So before the COVID crisis, then if you said to them, I'm going to ask you to do something every morning and then you're going to report back to me at the end of the day, they tell you to bugger off.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing where it comes down to now, I think, is the element of managing that micromanagement properly. I think the point that I like to use it is the bookend theory of like going, if you have the micromanagement at the start and potentially at the end of the day. So for us, we have daily stand-ups. We do the same thing when we kind of talk about.
Yeah, it's very common.
It's very common, but the nature of it is that we're working from home now. You have the freedom to go from this point to this point. You have the freedom now to make that day your own. Now, the hardest part is people who don't have the discipline in order to keep that focus on. I know I do sometimes. Sitting right next to me here is a giant TV with a PlayStation, which is very enticing all the time. But what's important for me is going, okay, if I can element myself and go, for 2 hours I'm doing this, for 2 hours I'm doing this, whatever it may be. Some people will struggle with that just based on seniority level, the element of the business that they're working in, depending on the tasks they've got for the day. I know sometimes we'll have cases where I'll go, I have X amount of things to do, and I'll get them done in like an hour and a half. And I'll go, okay, what do I do for the rest of the day? It's that part that's the hardest part for potentially like consultants like you guys have got, where people go, I've got all the stuff I want to do for the day and I've nailed it in a day, in an hour and a half. Do I now spend the rest of the day doing nothing, or do I maximize the amount of time that I've got to do other stuff? So for me, I'll do all my client stuff in the morning. For example, today I started at 4 o'clock in the morning because I've got clients in the US, which is how it goes for me. And I get all my admin and work stuff done in the morning. So for example, we're doing this call at 11 a.m. in the morning. You know, by the time it gets to 12:30 when we finish up, I will be, you know, having some more downtime and stuff like that because I can't focus. This is actually a good point. So you really kind of raised it there. And I think I totally agree with the element of the work from home. The one caveat I'd like to raise from that, though, is the quiver part you talked about in terms of people having the ability to manage this part. Do you think there's a teaching strategy or a way of coaching and stuff like that, potentially you can do online, something like that, that can build those quivers, say, in the same kind of way you could potentially do it face-to-face? Is there any sort of strategy or technique that you guys use at People2People that, you know, allow for that?
We're really struggling with that. With the people who don't have a lot of experience, it's hard. It's hard to actually give them the advice in the moment. It's a little bit like if you've got a pet, you know, the puppy who pees on the rug, you know, you have to do it in the moment. Yeah. And I'm not, so normally it's about, when people think of this, they think of it as a very negative thing. You know, they go, oh, okay, well, you have to tell somebody they've done something wrong. No, it's also the reverse. You need to tell people when somebody does something good, you got to go, oh, that was fantastic. You did a great job. Well done on that. And now, if they let's say they manage to turn somebody around from a counteroffer, that person does that and hangs up the phone and they go, well, good one, me.
Okay. So I think
culturally in Australia, you don't then get online and go, oh, I just did this. Look at me. People go, well, why are you talking yourself up, mate? You know,
we're in a country, and like New Zealand, Australia, the same. You can't boast about these things. You got to keep going. That's kind of how it works. People who do.
So, but we all love that, and particularly the personalities in recruitment. We love the pat on the back. That is part of what. That is where the adrenaline comes from. We love it. That's the sense of satisfaction that we get when we're told we've done a good job by our client or our candidates or our colleagues. That's part of the reason why we get out of bed and go to work every day, but also to get that check, to get the money, but also because we like that feeling that comes with that. Yeah, and you don't get it as much when you're sitting at home alone.
I know, I get that, and I don't think anyone is patting me on the back for making videos where I'm running around shirtless or doing anything goofy like that.
Mate, I heard about that.
Yeah, my Instagram blew up after that. Was great. Look, that covers that. I think that's a very good way of looking at it from the perspective of working from home being a benefit for your business. I think it's another part where people may go the opposite end and go, now this is a mandatory thing where you may lose that. I think that's very tough, especially in recruitment. So I totally agree with that. So that to me is, you got 3 from 3 so far. So I think that is a big factor. Which, of course, I like to lead to the 4th one you've got, because I think this one's quite interesting as well.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, it's similar to what we're talking about, so what we've already talked about, so we don't need to talk too much about it, I don't think, which is, I hear a lot, my business has not been affected by the recession. That's
I'd like to jump straight onto this one because it's a statement I find fascinating. And why I go like this is because you've said, my business is not affected by the thing. your business potentially could be immune, but the world around you is so damaged right now that you can't tell me that it's not a customer or a client or a consultant or a business manager, whatever it may be, that's told you that, yes, they're still happy. I've got one of my best mates is a salesperson for a legal tech company. They had a massive drop off, but their CEO was telling them, no, we're doing fine. But now they're back to kind of on the upswing. And he's like, yeah, we're doing better than ever. And it's like, you could genuinely see like, well, hang on a second, we can tell certain things. And we at VMJ have said the same thing, where it's like, look, we've had people that have said to us, hey, look, we're not able to continue making video. We're not able to continue, doing these sort of things. We're like, hey, well, let's help you out during this time. Let's give you some value and maybe some training or a couple of, free sessions, whatever it may be. But what I want to boil this down to now for your point is that when someone says they're not affected, why would someone say that?
Well, maybe they genuinely haven't been affected financially, but the point is exactly the case, which is that everything else around them has changed. And it's what we've already talked about, that nothing's going to be the same again. Everything is changing. And there are unforeseen circumstances. Things like that I'm quite battling with right now with leases. How much space do you take? Do you need the interview rooms? Yeah. When are we're doing fewer interview rooms? How much space do you need but then again, do we need a desk for everyone? But then hot desking is not really allowed now because of social distancing. So it's quite an interesting, so that would have been unforeseen with a downturn. So how's that going to affect the property market and all that? Who knows? And yet there'll be some people in that sector going, yeah, we're doing okay. I've been to a couple of recruitment things in this time, and you'll hear some people going, yeah, we're fine. We're doing all right. No problem at all. Yeah, things are pretty good. Going, well, yeah, they might be okay now, but everything else around you is going to change, and your customer base as it is now is not going to stay the same.
I want to jump on that part as well. The way you delivered that. No, we're fine. We're all good. Hey, we're sweet. It's like the element of whilst I love the recruitment industry and the nature of everything it brings, one thing I find fascinating is the element of the fake boast, which is hilarious in terms of you get people like that. I get it all the time. Trust me, I've seen. I'm not going to jump into it. But what I find interesting about it is the nature of we're all in this together. So this is the perfect time to be transparent, to be honest about it, say certain things, because you have people around you. It's the same certain things. So your business may not be affected that much, but if you look at the candidates, the consultants, the people around you, it has. Final part on this, because I know we've talked about it to death a little bit, but when you talked about the element of office space, leasing, stuff like that, I find this, because we've got an office. I've not been to my office in 9 weeks. But what I think is going to be interesting is the nature of smaller businesses deciding completely just go, no, we don't need this. We can do all our stuff from home, save yourself some cost. What is the benefit of, not necessarily downsizing, but keeping the size that you are? Do you like the original? Is there any benefit to, keeping your? Well,
you need to. Now is the time you need to examine the variables. So when you're considering your office space, you've got to be thinking about, so in the past you would go in there and you'd look at, well, we need this amount of square meters for this number of consultants and this number of interview rooms. That's changed. That model has changed. So you can remodel it. Now's the chance to do it. Think of it in a different way.
I like that. All right.
Yeah. Cool. Sex up your office in a different way. Who knows? You could do it now's the chance to actually do that and to reboot. It sounds counterintuitive. Why would you be wanting to spend money on a fit out and all that sort of thing? But you don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money to change the way your office is laid out or something like that.
I totally agree. I think if you want to sex up the office, I do sell pictures of myself if you really want to take a look at that to really deter people coming into the office. I appreciate that. If you want people to work from home, I do have a series of photos that will help with that. So that is fine. Let's move from that to your final point today, your final 5th BS. Now, before we get into this one, what I'd be, well, actually, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to bother with that. We're going to wait till later on. What is your 5th BS that you've got here today, Mark?
Yeah, again, we've already talked about it, so it's going to be really quick. There are plenty of candidates out there right now.
Okay, so.
And that's bullshit. That's not. I mean, there are, but they're not because of the hesitancy that we've already talked about.
I've got a point I want to ask about this one because I think this is the interesting part there are lots of candidates out there. We talk about a candidate-driven market. We talk about the element of businesses looking for the top talent and stuff like that. And the part that's coming in, or the part that to me is coming in now, and I'm looking at it and going, we're going to see a lot of businesses do a lot of short-term 6-month contracts, I think, till the end of the year, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stuff like that, short-term contracts. with these people that are potentially out of work and stuff like that. But when we get back to a point where we see more permanent sort of things come in, do you think there is a tipping point for these candidates that are saying, I don't need the work right now, or stuff like the health thing? What does that tipping point look like in terms of people, potentially accepting these roles?
Well, the punctuation will be the end of JobKeeper. That will be an interesting point to watch. So as an observer in the employment market, that's where you'd say, well, is there anything that ultimately changes at that point? Otherwise, though, look, on the candidate short market, it will remain the same. That's really my point, the candidate hesitancy and stuff. So if you're in talent acquisition and you're a business owner, or you're a corporate and you're watching this and you go, right, well now, and this is what the man on the street would say, there must be heaps of people out there who can fill these jobs right now. And the answer is no, there's not. Either because of candidate hesitancy, or because the best people are still in work and you still have to coach them out, and you can't coach them out because they're worried about uncertainty or whatever it is that they happen to be worried about. So for a recruiter or a talent acquisition person, the message is you still have to candidate pool. You still have to manage your candidate and talent banks. If you don't do that, then you will fail. Don't assume now that it's just the whole, well, I'm now doing business development, then I'm doing job filling. Now I'm doing business development, doing job filling. You need to, at this all the time, even during the depths of a recession, be pooling your candidates, because the top talent is in work right now and not necessarily looking for something. If you're a corporate, then don't think that, well, I can go out and get the best talent now really quickly and easily because they're all available. Well, they're not, and they're not going to be willing to move. So that also means, from a salary perspective, you're still going to have all those issues around benefits and paying people the right money. The media, as you watch it, says, well, salaries will go down. Maybe for unskilled work, but for the roles that recruitment agencies are engaged to fill, that's not necessarily going to be the case.
Okay, there's 2 points from this that I find incredibly interesting. So I think, from what I've seen and the people I've spoken to in the industry that we're in, there is a legitimate false narrative in terms of how businesses are pushing the nature of the candidate shortage, things like that. So Rebecca Powell made a really good point last week where she was applying for a talent acquisition, manager role, and then all of a sudden the title changed, but all the responsibilities stayed the same. This is where you talk about the business side of things.
Yes, I watched that, and I thought it was interesting.
I think that's the interesting part, is you go, okay, this is the naughty part of COVID, where you go, well, hang on a second, you think you can get the best quality, just because the quality is now potentially, out there now in a less constricted manner of being at a job and you don't have to go back doing them. You should not be going out there and going, well, if I can get a talent manager at a talent specialist price, then I'm doing my business a service. Well, actually, you're doing the exact opposite in terms of going, well, actually, you've got this fantastic talent, you bring them in, you essentially immediately make their role seem smaller, or like they're less important. You're going to potentially pick that person and be a negative side of things. So that's where the false narrative comes in of going, oh, there's lots of people out there for jobs, so I'm a TA, I'll go, I'll just, I can get them, usually they'll take 135, but now because it's currently in this, they'll take 95 and they'll do whatever it may be. And you go, well, don't exploit this pandemic for your own business kind of things. Make sure there's still some positive out there.
Well, how naive is that from a business perspective? If you're the owner of that business and the only thing that you've got a job and you're trading off on salaries, you should be thinking about, what's the job I need doing?
Yeah.
And then meet the market. Then you go to the market and you say, this is the job I need to do, and you would brief your recruiter on that and say, roughly, what do you think that salary would be? Well, okay, you come to me with the people who can do this job and what their salary expectations are. Exactly. Because if you rip somebody off, they're not going to last they're not going to stay a long time with you. So the long-term opportunity cost is much.
Well, the long-term opportunity cost of this is the fascinating part, going, well, you might employ them for a couple of months and get something done in the short term, but in the long term, your business PR has taken a hit, because if that person is vocal and that person is experienced and that person has a following, you're in serious trouble. You've seen people make accusations at different businesses about fair pay and stuff like that. There was the chef recently that had a couple of restaurants that was underpaying his staff dramatically.
Well, there's a few chefs. What's his name? MasterChef.
Plug the crap out of me now. But basically, yeah. So that's the point, is that it's the PR mixed in with this. So what I want to, you talk about the
The last thing I would say on that, though, to your point on contractors. So when I first started, I was a temp recruiter. I was a temp recruiter for a very, very long time. Yeah? So I'd always say to candidates, it's not about what you're worth, it's what the job is paying. Yeah. So you got to meet the market. So that's why I think you're right that there'll be more contract work. So you get paid for the job that you do. So if you're a neurosurgeon and you're doing a receptionist job, you get paid as a receptionist. It doesn't matter that you've got all this. So it depends on what the actual job that you're actually doing. So I think you'll see a lot of corporates go out as go to market, and then if they need particular skills, they won't necessarily hire people permanently to start off with. They'll start with contract. I'll say, this is what I need doing. Who have you got who can do this job? You then have that conversation, say, this is the hourly rate, and off you go. So you might find that some people who are out of work, like these there's a recruiter downstairs in my building here. Now, and he ran an ad for a recruiter, yeah, because his business is doing well. It's in engineering, he's got a lot of government clients. He's fine, yeah. So right now, so he's looking for a recruiter. If he ran that ad 6 months ago, he would have 2 responses. Probably one from overseas looking for a visa, and the other person, got fired from their last job. He got 600 responses last week.
I'll give you another example of that. Google placed an ad on LinkedIn, customer success manager for Google Cloud. And the reason why I found it interesting is because it pops up and you get popped up on your LinkedIn of going,
it tells you how many applications? Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so I checked the first day I checked it, there was like 15 or 20, something like that. The next day I checked it, there was 745 applications. Now, of course, Google being the name that it is and stuff like, you get small businesses. But the difference is that I took a look at the brief and they had changed the brief, completely what they wanted to do. They clearly had a thing in mind, but it wasn't cleared up that they needed 10 years experience, but before they had 5 years experience. And then as soon as you see the applications, 10 years experience, it's kind of that same element of going, okay, same thing. But it's not because they're doing anything negative, it's because they went and go, actually, this is the kind of person that we want, and we've got too many applicants who aren't right for this particular job. So you get that. But for your mate who's the engineering recruiter, you're going to get so many people that will apply, things like that. But what I think is interesting out of all this is that, be positive in this environment, be happy, not be happy, be willing to take the risk, as you said before, but also look at and go,
use that nervous energy, that worry that you've got. Think of it as excitement. It's anticipating what could happen. Now, and sure, there are financial consequences, but that's okay. You got to run with that, and you got to be pragmatic and conservative in your finances and all that. What is that old saying? Sales is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king.
Yeah, my favourite saying is basically, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different response. And this pandemic has forced people to change their directive, which is great. So, look, I totally agree with all the points there, and I think 5 for 5 is not rare because I'm very, very lenient on these things, and I totally agree with people. But what I would like to now move to is what's important so. After all this is great. We're sort of running out of time here that we're going to work on. But what I like to do with my guests is give them a gift and sort of let them, work from that. So usually the gift I give is a nice photo of me. Now, unfortunately, I don't have that, so this will represent it for today. So I'm going to get that gift eventually. I'm going to head to the office. I'm 8 for 8 right now. Everyone's wanted the photo, but always kept it for myself. So pretend this is the photo of me. This is what I'll be giving you, sort of thing. So
you're giving me a photo of yourself, Ben? Is that it?
Well, it's the only way to sex up your office.
And look, you're an attractive man. But I'm sorry, I'm washing my hair. That's all I'm going to say.
I've had many people reject me. I've had many people, including my parents, reject me over the years. But this is probably harsher because you gave me the nice positive and then the negative, which is what I like to call a compensalt, which is a compliment. I'm a little bit sad about that, but I'm 9 for 9. This is great. Everyone, this is fantastic. So, without further ado, we're about to finish up here. Mark, is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with after watching this today? Is there anything that you would like to leave them with, or what? Yeah,
one thing I would so if I was to leave is that it's all okay. Don't worry, it's fine. To use a very shallow Australian vernacular, it is, she'll be right. It's okay. If you do the little things right, you experiment, you make sure that you're not drinking the Kool-Aid, and that and don't do the actions that are required during this time, you'll be fine. I'm actually still very positive about the industry as a whole. I'm challenged by the circumstances that we're going through. It's not easy financially. It's very difficult, and I've had some sleepless nights. But the reality is I know that this will get through to the other side, and things will get a lot better again. So yeah, feel good about it. Use, like I said, that nervous energy. Be excited and anticipate the changes that are going to come. It's going to be good.
I love that. So with that all in mind, I want to quickly plug Mark's business. If you guys are looking for recruitment, accounting, business support, stuff like that, People2People are a fantastic business that operates in that. What I'd like you also to do, if you get the chance, is to take a look at people like Amy Burton, Sally Warwood, Erin Devlin, Aidan Boast, making some fantastic content in this time at the moment. That's not necessarily about job placements, but just all about operating in the right way. So if you get the chance, go take a look at them on LinkedIn, and Mark's business as a whole. So the link to their platform will be either up here or down here, depending on the platform that we're on, LinkedIn, YouTube. What I'd like to leave everyone with today, and this sort of thing as well, is that I want to work with Mark's sentiments here, is that we are all going to get through this if we stop panicking and we kind of understand that the steps to take are logical. We've got lots of things that we can do. So the good thing is that we've got a few more ThisIsBS ISOs coming up, which would be great. But Mark, I want to thank you for you taking the time to speak with me today. I would like to see more of the recruitment consulting world get together and understand that this is only a small take. We can change, we can move, we can build from this. So thank you for your time, Mark. Much appreciated. And we will see you later on down the line. So thanks, everyone.
All the best. Thanks, Ben.